And again, it's interesting to try to figure out why, but I also want to figure out, it is a big deal in the MAGA movement, too. I mean, basically, Orban, after Trump's election, said the future has begun. He posts pictures of himself with Musk and Trump. A top official at the Heritage Foundation, of course, behind Project 2025, said, quote, modern Hungary is not just a model for the conservative statecraft, but the model. Orban says, we've entered the policy writing system of President Donald Trump's team. We have deep involvement there. So play that forward. What does that mean for America?
Yeah, I mean, I really wish that those who find a model in the Hungarian and Viktor Orban's leadership could really dig into and unpack the facts. I mean, I even heard a prominent U.S. official recently refer to the Hungarian government's actions vis-a-vis their universities there as somehow a model for what the United States should consider. And I think what's motivating that is a legitimate policy disagreement in the United States about issues involving controversial social issues in the United States on which Americans have different views and strongly held ones. But even using the university example, I mean, what happened to the Hungarian universities was not necessarily about, pushing out woke ideology. They took all of the public universities that existed in Hungary. They removed the boards of directors of those universities. They transferred all of the universities to these newly created private foundations and installed Fidesz party loyalists to run those foundations for lifetime tenure. So what happened was, while they were talking about wokeism, there was a wholesale removal of public assets into private pockets. And so for those who are looking to Hungary as an inspiration of somehow standing up for values and ideas that Americans have different views about, I really think that some facts in this conversation are necessary and important, because I think when you look at what's happening, what you see is not conservatism, but what you see is corruption.
So, even Marco Rubio, then as a senator, now as secretary, then as a senator, during the Trump first term, expressed concern about Hungary's slide into autocracy. How would you characterize it now? What do you think now that Rubio is essentially, on Trump team and as Secretary of State? What do you think the U.S. will do with Hungary, or in essentially following the script, which is actually using the law to change the law?
Yes, it remains to be seen. However, one thing I did take a lot of comfort in when I was U.S. ambassador was, no matter how much the Hungarian government tried to frame the activities and policies of the United States as somehow the actions of a woke Democratic Party, in fact, I think the concerns I'm articulating are much more bipartisan in nature in the United States. I had, Christian, some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress come visit me in Budapest. And you don't need to listen to my characterization of what they said. Read their statements. I mean, they were, to a person, concerned deeply about the relationship that was emerging between Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin, Viktor Orban and Xi Jinping, the corruption that was happening, the closing space for civil society. And you're right, the current Secretary of State, when he was a senator, spoke very clearly to then President Trump about his own concerns on this. So I hope, again, that the facts prevail. What the policy ultimately is remains to be seen. But I think it would be a mistake to buy into this phony narrative that Viktor Orban is trying to sell, that he's somehow a champion of conservative values, when in fact what's happening there is something far more base.
Both Orban and Trump appear to be on the same side when it comes to Putin, Ukraine. Where do you think this is going to lead? How much power does Orban have within the EU and NATO to be a spoiler? As we know, this week, the EU is trying to get together to figure out how to pick up the pieces that the Trump administration has left it regarding pulling its support from Ukraine.
Look, Viktor Orban was, when we left office, was one of the most isolated political figures, certainly within the alliance and within the European Union, because what he was doing was leveraging his membership in those organizations for his own personal power and financial benefit. And so I think that it would be a huge mistake to relieve that pressure. I mean, I can't explain to you what is happening with shifts in U.S. policy vis-a-vis President Zelensky and Ukraine. I'm deeply concerned about it, obviously. But I can explain to you why Viktor Orban took the positions he did vis-a-vis Vladimir Putin's Russia. And he did that for power and for money. I mean, remember, this is a man who exempted his country at a time where Europe was finally getting serious about energy diversification after Putin invaded Ukraine in February of 2022. Orban exempts himself from the sanctions that are imposed, particularly on pipeline oil. Then instead of reducing his dependency upon Russia, increases it, imports more oil, and in 2022 arbitraged the price and made $2.2 billion that then went into his government. And by the way, that money then went from his government to this oligarch network we were talking about. So I can understand what is motivating Prime Minister Orban's policies vis-a-vis Putin. It's something pretty simple. I don't understand what's motivating the new U.S. policy.